Welcome to Nation in Focus, a program that looks at issues of the day with the help of practitioners and subject matter experts. I'm your host, Sunil Lalla, and today we're going to be discussing the very important topic of crime. Joining us, we have Dr. Keron King. He's a criminologist and senior lecturer at COSTAATT. Legal officer for the police service, Corporal Zaheer Ali. And joining us via Zoom is Dr. Seepersad. He's also a criminologist and the coordinator of the Criminology unit at the University of the West Indies. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for having us. It's a pleasure as well.
Just want to get to the first question. Just to break the ice, Dr. King, how have crime trends in Trinidad and Tobago evolved in recent years, and what do you see as the main driving factors behind these changes?
Yes, as we all know, crime has exploded exponentially over the past few decades. When we think about the 1990s, for instance, just using the murder rate as an example, we know that 9 for every 100,000 persons were murdered in 1990. When we come to the 2020s, the number is somewhere around 30-something, 35, 36 plus. So we're talking about a jump of almost 400%, a quadruple jump. So it's significant, and the members of the public are no doubt feeling and experiencing the ways in which that level of violence has destabilized our society. The way I think about it in terms of driving factors, I think most persons agree that the transnational crime, insofar as drugs, the easy access to guns in our society, has significantly changed the ways in which violence looks in our society. So we know that the vast majority of crime is perpetrated, the firearm is the weapon of choice. So I think one of the major drivers is the transnational crime, insofar as the easy access of guns and the drug trade.
Mr. Ali, I know you're part of the police service in terms of the legal officer there. What are some of the trends you all are seeing? And I know you possibly might have some inside information as well, but could you tell us about some of those trends you've been seeing in from the TNT Police Services perspective?
Well, what I will say is that, from a crime and problem analysis perspective, we are seeing that, from in the context of murders, we are seeing that there's a high percentage of gang-related murders. So immediately we recognize that organized crime and gang activity has definitely prevailed over the last couple of years, and we are seeing the impact of criminal gang activities. And just to give an example, we have seen gang activity impacting our health system recently. In the Port of Spain General Hospital, we would have seen gang activity being played off in the major roads of Trinidad and Tobago, where innocent persons would have lost their life. So where gang activity and organized crime is concerned, is definitely a concern for the TTPS. And this is where we are directing, our efforts to try and bring gang activity and organized crime under control.
How much of a significant aspect is it? Because we're seeing crime now infiltrating somewhat in public spaces. We saw an incident recently in the Citrus Center where someone was robbed there. Is this a concern?
Definitely. When you be speaking about anti-gang and organized crime, we are seeing, and just from a legislative context, one of the purposes of the anti-gang legislation was to ensure that we suppress gang activity to ensure that there is safety and security. So when you are seeing gang activity playing off in the public domain, you are definitely going to be concerned because this is the said thing that you are trying to prevent.
Dr. Seepersad, you're joining us via Zoom. I want to ask you, what are some of the trends, you're a criminologist as well, what are some of the trends you're seeing?
So what I want to underscore is that the number of crimes you see in the police statistics is really very much an underrepresentation of the true extent of criminal offending. Reason being, a lot of persons actually do not report crimes that occur to the police, so they never make it onto CAPA's statistics. And over, surveys within the region, and indeed with Trinidad and Tobago, with the most recent survey in Trinidad and Tobago conducted by the Ministry of National Security in 2022, continuously show that there are far more crimes happening than those which are reported to the police. So this really is something that is very, very troubling, because what really happens when you look at the magnitude of offending in official police data compared to victimization survey data, you would see sometimes that the actual rate of offending is sometimes 4 times, 5 times, 7 or 8 times higher than what you're seeing in the police statistics. And when you look at why people don't report crimes to the police, you get all kinds of reasons coming through. In some cases, police are, persons are afraid of the perpetrators. In some cases, persons are afraid of collaboration between rogue elements of the police and the criminals, so they're afraid to report, etc. So there are a lot of reasons given, but the magnitude of the problem is far worse than I think we quite often recognize, especially if we limit our view to only police statistics.
Ms. Ali, I know this question would fall directly in your alley. In your view, what are some of the most critical reforms needed in law enforcement or the judicial system to more effectively address crime?
Well, Sunil, I must be fair to the response from the state. And, just by way of example, recently the state brought the Administration of Justice Indictable Proceedings Act. And when you look at that legislation, that legislation was geared towards ensuring that there's speedy trials. It was geared towards ensuring that cases are properly managed in order to ensure there's a proper balance in the administration of justice. So just by way from a legislative intervention, it required persons to be diligent in terms of how they, treat with justice. And then when you look at, for example, the bail reform, you actually saw an intervention again from the state with reference to looking at persons who are on murder charges. They must be showing exceptional circumstances if they are to be successful in, being granted bail. So just by way of two examples, the state has responded. But, the question that you asked directly, I think that when we are looking at gang activity, it is my respectful view that we need to review our response to treating with gangs with a view of disrupting and dismantling. I think that we have spoken about those two words, from an operative context. But, I think that we need to have a look again and see whether, in fact, our structure and system, and most importantly, our people that we have engaging these activities, whether, in fact, they are fit for purpose.
Dr. King, the state has always been looking and trying to get more legislation in place. What are we seeing? I know there's always some kickback from the opposition in terms of supporting some of those legislation, but do we need more legislation, Dr. King?
I suppose we could always advance our legislative framework to meet our needs. But from my own point of view, especially if we're talking about violent street crime, I think we also need to think through what are how effective the institutions are operating from the point of view of preventing crime. Oftentimes when we think about crime, we think about how we respond, the reactive mode. But in terms of the larger discussion about reform and what we need to do, I think we need to focus on the prevention aspect. So, for example, gangs. People are recruited into gangs. We need to look at the research and examine what are the factors that push people into towards gangs and figure out the ways in which our social services, the ways in which our investment in our social institutions are working in ways to pull people away from gangs, right? There's always two sides to the coin, and I don't want people to feel that the discussion is only a reactionary one. That is definitely important, but it's crucial to also see it from a point of view of driving. So, for example, a large amount of individuals who join gangs, some of the research suggests that they do so because they don't feel a bond to society. They don't feel connected to society, and they find that connection in the gangs. My question will be, what are we doing to ensure those individuals, maybe we meet them at the school or in the community, what are we doing to ensure that they feel a bond to society, that they feel connected, so they don't feel attracted to the gang, more and over, in addition to legislation, but that doesn't need law. You know what I'm saying? That is something that we could work on immediately.
Dr. Seepersad, just want to get your input, and I know you talked about, persons, offenders having 3 and 4 and 5 offenses to their name. What about in terms of recidivism? Is that a major issue we still have, and what programs do we need to actually get these persons somewhat involved?
Right. So I'm really glad that you raised that question, because quite often we really ignore, the role of prisons, the role of offenders when it comes to contributing to crime. Too often we take this very narrow and limited view that the prisons are doing their job as long as they incarcerate persons and keep them out of the public. But the thing is, when you think about a prison, you really could think about a prison as being a university for crime, where persons learn new skills, they make new contacts, meaning pro-criminal contacts. They become isolated from the wider society. They lose familial contacts. They lose their jobs. They have very little assistance when it comes to reintegration, sometimes very little in the way of rehabilitation. So when they get back out there into society, there is a very high likelihood of recidivism. And currently, the latest figures show that our recidivism rates in Trinidad and Tobago are around 45%. So it means that when we look at the prison system, it could actually, in fact, it is actually contributing to the crime situation. So it's not that we cannot try to fix that system or we shouldn't try to fix that system. Indeed, we should try to fix that system. We should try to find out what are the issues, what are the gaps, what are the constraints. For instance, what can we do better when it comes to rehabilitation? And as a good, simple example, the prisons use the LSTMI instrument to assess inmates when they come in and to design custom-built rehabilitation programs that would have a high likelihood of success. But the problem is the prison system doesn't really have the resources and the staffing to offer the kinds of rehabilitation programs that might be needed. Coupled with that is a very serious lack of attention given to reintegration, because once a person walks out of the prison system, they're really left to their own devices with very little support. And that certainly is a recipe for disaster. So we definitely do need to think of this whole idea of recidivism, and not just that, not just recidivism within the prison system, but also out there in wider society, those persons who are repeat offenders. So Dr. King was really spot on, when he spoke about the need for looking at root causes and the underlying drivers and the need to move away only from focusing very heavily on a suppressive approach to dealing with the crime problem. And one of the spaces within which that whole issue of crime prevention works is within those high-risk populations. So we're talking secondary crime prevention, meaning focusing on those offenders who are really high-rate offenders, but who are out there in the community. That's a form of recidivism as well. So all of that really does indeed need to be addressed.
Dr. King, just quickly before we take a break, what is the link-up program by COSTAATT as we're talking about all this, and what does it aim to achieve?
Thank you for asking that question. It's a program we at COSTAATT are very happy about. And it comes on, it's a nice follow-up to the point that Dr. Seepersad made around recidivism. International research makes the point very clear. There are three main factors that are related to why people reoffend: lack of housing, lack of education, and lack of employment. What we have COSTAATT has designed is something called a prison to college pipeline. What we are saying is that, listen, we want to figure out ways in how do we construct our pipeline to increase the access to persons who are incarcerated, but also the persons who are formerly incarcerated, so they can access higher education, they can work on their gaps where they exist, and hopefully build competency to increase their chances on the job market. One of the exciting things about this program is persons, when they return home from prison, they often don't consider themselves as prime candidates to join a college or a higher ed environment. But this is exactly what they need, because not only it gives them the competence and the skills and the education, and it helps with the development of the adult mind, it also gives them access to a different social circle. And it's exactly the kind of connection that they need. So this prison to college pipeline, it is just that, a pipeline between the prison and the college to open access not just to education, but just to reiterate, to expose these individuals to entirely different social network. We believe constructing this type of pipeline will increase their chances in securing meaningful work and meaningful employment, and hopefully in the long term they will not be a need to reoffend, but even more further than that, they will contribute to society and hopefully turn around and play a greater role in crime prevention and public safety.
Dr. King, thank you very much. You've been watching Nation in Focus, and we've been discussing the very important topic of crime. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Nation in Focus. We've been discussing, as I said before, the very important discussion of crime. And I want to pose a question to the legal officer of the TTPS, Dr. Ali. What are the programs or strategies, local or international, could be impactful in Trinidad and Tobago? I know the Minister of Youth Development and National Service, he has several services as well in terms of MILAT and so, but in your experience from the TTPS, what sort of services can we see?
Well, Sunil, it's important, and I'm happy that you take me into the aspect where, I refer to as the soft or the social intervention approach. And I think that when we are speaking about gang and organized crime, I think that the education system, the evidence is there that or I should say the intelligence and evidence that, we are seeing that the gang activity are creeping into our nation's schools. And I think it's important for us, and, as Dr. King indicated, it's important for us to identify that at an early stage and make a meaningful intervention where you have a multi-sector intervention, because the children, if we are not careful, can be an area that it's a recruiting drive for these criminal gangs. And I'm sure that Trinidad and Tobago would have recognized some time ago where music, that Trinidad music was being used to promote and to recruit gangs, persons to gangs, sorry. So I think it's important for us in terms of social intervention. That's important for us to identify and educate our young children to understand, most importantly, the consequences of getting involved in criminal gang activity. So that's one. And the second thing I'd like to say is that is my respectful view that, and we were having a discussion, Dr. King and I, that the community policing concept, in my view, has to be reviewed. I think that we have, in my respectful view, we have placed a lot of focus on police youth clubs, which has its benefits, but community policing is a broader mechanism. And if we are speaking about, and I know the two criminologists is here, if we are looking at applying theories like the zero tolerance and the broken windows theory, it's important for us to look at community policing to be able to deal with societal issues, community issues, because, the broken windows theory is clear that, when small crimes are overlooked, bigger crimes, evolve. And I think from a social intervention context, I like to see those two areas be directed upon. But this permit me, Sunil, just 30 seconds, that just to go back to the previous question, I think that we've been looking at it from a blue-collar context as well. But I think it's important for us to make a salient call on this platform for a swift, full proclamation of the Civil Recovery Management and Unexplained Wealth Act, so that we have a situation where we are not only looking at gangs from a blue-collar context, but we are looking at the benefits, because that's a major area as to why persons get involved in organized crime. So I just wanted to bring that into the equation as we move forward in dealing with gangs and organized crime.
Dr. Seepersad, just want to get your input. Just last year, we would have seen at a CARICOM meeting, I think it was in Guyana, Dr. Ali, Mr. Ali just talked about, using music as a way to get gangs involved. How much of an issue is this?
Right, so it definitely is an issue. And I think what Mr. Ali was actually suggesting is not using music to get involved, and Mr. Ali could correct me, but he was actually suggesting that gangs are actually disseminating their cultures through music and art forms, such as Trinidad and Tobago music. And what I've seen in the intelligence reports is that the youths are attracted to the lifestyle that is being portrayed, and the wealth and the weapons and the power. And they're actually gravitating towards the gangs, which you see as a very glamorous lifestyle, as a result of the music that is being disseminated and the music videos and all of that. And Mr. Ali is definitely spot on. What the most recent research shows is that 4.3% of school youths in Tobago, and I'm talking from 4 and 5 school youths in Tobago and 8% in Trinidad, actually say that they belong to a gang. Well, this is something that is extremely troubling. It's extremely troubling because what it suggests is that there is a very, very wide pool of persons who eventually would become or could potentially become adult gang members. So what we really do need is some sort of a counter narrative when it comes to countering the image and the messages that are being sent by gangs to the young, impressionable persons that we have out there in the society. And the thing is, the reality is, if you are familiar with the operation of gangs, it's not this glamorous lifestyle. It's really a very, very dangerous lifestyle where the likelihood of being killed is very, very high. It's a brutal, it's a very violent lifestyle, but it's not what the youths believe as a result of the music. And there is the need indeed for some sort of counter narrative, to educate, so to speak, the youths about the dangers of the gang lifestyle and about the inaccuracies that are really being portrayed via the media that gangs are actually putting out.
Dr. King, what do you believe, and I know Mr. Ali would like to jump in on this as well, but what do you believe drives individuals to join gangs, and how realistically, how can law enforcement and communities really work together to sort of disrupt these networks?
When I think about gangs and membership, gang recruitment, the concept that comes to my mind is social capital. Oftentimes when we think about starting a business, for instance, the business person needs capital. My own readings and examination of the research around gangs and recruitment is that there seems to be a strong relationship with the strength of a community in terms of their social networks. I mean, in our own local parlance, we might talk about the ways in which it takes a village to raise a child. The stronger one's social capital, the healthier one's social capital, in some ways serves as a protective factor that prevents and protects individuals from joining gangs. I remember reading some research that says that one of the strongest predictors that influences adolescents to engage in antisocial behavior is the lack of supervision. Something so simple, like the lack of supervision for the adolescent. So I think one of the things we need to focus on is thinking through how do we help these communities that have what we call concentrated social disadvantages. It does seem as if everything is wrong in the community. Mommy is working, daddy is working, no one is at home after school, there's no supervision, no one to help at homework. Is it after school activities? Is it after evening clubs for school, to help with schoolwork? But something around, in some ways, creating a assistance and support at the level of the family unit. That's one thing I could think about gangs recruitment. And as Sergeant Ali said earlier, I too am particularly interested in community-oriented policing, because it is when we find ways to connect the police, law enforcement, the members of the community, and other stakeholders to solve their own problems. They know what are their problems. They know what they need to target. And when they come up with innovative and ingenious ways to solve these root causes, why it is this particular house on the street might have no one at home, and you could see it from before that this child is going on the wrong path. What does a solution look like? I firmly believe that the solutions to these problems must be found and based at the level of the community, with the support of state institutions and even private and corporate sector.
Mr. Ali, just to get your input, and talking about communities, we always talk about it takes a village to raise a child, and have we been seeing that are the communities actually afraid to have their inputs in the upbringing of our children these days?
Well, I think so. That's a real issue, and just to go back to Dr. Seepersad, when he identified several reasons why the community may not be as involved as one would expect. Very live issues in terms of fear, the impact, or I should say, the negative impact and consequences that can flow from persons looking at gangs operating within their community. But I think that again it comes to education, that the society has a major role to play. And if you just look and reflect on the Evidence Act, there are ways in which you can bring forward your intelligence. There are ways that you can bring forward your evidence. And we have seen so many other avenues in terms of the anonymous, the 555 and other systems. So I'm saying that while, yes, there are matters that may be impacting the level of involvement from members of the community, there are also other avenues that can be utilized. But I want to emphasize to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who will be listening to us, that's important for us, that while we have the three institutions of the state, the parliament, the judiciary, and the executive playing their role, the citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago has just as important role with reference to when we are treating with crime. And when you just go back in the Anti-Gang Act, it has placed a responsibility on those who are aware of gang-related activities or concealing gang leaders and gang members, that they have a responsibility and a duty to disclose that information. And, just to, agitate it a little bit, Sunil, that we must recognize that while we are living in a community, We must be careful that we are not seeing things that tomorrow turn against us. And until we don't get that within ourselves to recognize that we are in this together, we have to treat with this head on. You're going to find that gangs will always be having the upper hand, and it's something that we need to push back with. So again, it's a all of society approach. I've heard Dr. Seepersad, Dr. King spoke about it on previous platforms, but I think we really need to, when I see in this particular period, I'm seeing that, a lot of discussions, a lot of calls for even constitutional reform. Because, let's face it, Sunil, and to the two criminologists, that when I spoke about structure and system a while ago, we have a Police Service Act in 2006 with regulations. The question that one may ask, is it that the police service is properly configured, structure and system, to meet this major challenge with gangs and organized crime? A very big question.
And Dr. Seepersad, just to get your input, how can we really see government policies best support and strengthen crime reduction strategies moving forward?
So that's a very good question. And I think actually Dr. King alluded to it, and Mr. Ali as well, that what we have seen is a very, very heavy emphasis on crime suppression. So what that means is that the primary approach, and with successive governments, has been one that focuses squarely on the prison system, the police, and the courts. And there is a total or almost total, I would say, neglect of the root drivers.
Next question. We always talk about the fear of crime. Mr. Ali, what impact does the media reporting on crime have, and how should the media really report on crime and criminal activity?
I think it's a very sensitive question, Sunil, and I think that, just taking from the apex law, the Constitution, the media enjoys the freedom of the press. And I think that when you have democracy, you want to ensure that there's the opportunity for the media to really promote that democracy. All I'll say is that, to the media is that they have to continue to be responsible and sensitive to what's happening. And just by way of example, if as a society that we are fighting against criminal gang and organized crime, then you should be sensitive to understand that you do not place a gang leader in the front page. These are things that they strive on. So, just by way of an example, but where the media is concerned, I would be very careful, to infringe on the freedom of the press. They should enjoy that without any interference. But again, the only thing I'll say is that they just need to be sensitive as to the times that we are living in. And as I said before, and I need to repeat it, that the gangs will flourish if they are seeing themselves in the front page, because this is what gangs are doing. If you are making headlines, you may appear to be more attractive. You may appear to be more in the spotlight. So from a psychological context, it's important for they to understand the pulse of the nation. But generally speaking, I think that they enjoy freedom of the press, and they must be allowed to continue to be responsible in enjoying that right.
Dr. King, looking ahead, which emerging issues you think will pose the greatest challenges to combating crime?
If you could permit me, Sunil, just to go back on the media, the crime media discussion, I agree totally with Mr. Ali. I also want to, however, I want to add that there's a way in which language matters. And sometimes the media could be guilty in the sense that language is power. And my own interest, of course, has a lot to do with formerly incarcerated people. I've been trying to, me and many other colleagues have been trying to push the need not to refer to persons as inmates or ex-inmates, because what it does, it takes away the fact that, as Dr. Seepersad mentioned earlier, the whole prisonization effect, they go through a process where they lose context with family members, they lose contact with society. So just referring to them as an inmate doesn't paint the whole picture, or as an ex-con, or as an ex-inmate. I am more persuaded by using languages like they have been incarcerated, or they are now formally incarcerated. So that's one thing. I think language matters. Sometimes when the media reports, for example, intimate partner violence, where sometimes the victim, most times the victims might be a woman, will be a woman, sometimes they silence the fact that the perpetrator was a man. And they might just simply say, this woman was beaten or one was killed. And then we know the perpetrator or the accused, and they silence that aspect in the discourse as if the perpetrator is invisible. So I think those are some critiques we can lay at the media's feet, that that language matters and that aspect of the discourse is important. So, similarly, when the children are victims, how they report issues when children are victims, I think they have gotten much better where that is concerned, but we can always do better in that regard as well.
Dr. Seepersad, just to get your inputs on that media question, and also, some people describe crime as a business. Who are some of the people in the legal businesses but benefit because crime exists locally?
Right. So two separate questions, and I'm really glad that you posed that question on the media back to me. Dr. King is spot on, and the problem is really something that's a very grave concern, because the media actually has the power to shape people's reality. And I'll give you a very, very concrete example. One of the things that the Ministry of National Security did in its last victimization survey in 2023 was ask people about their personal experiences with the police, but then also at the same time ask very similar questions or the same questions, but in the context of the national population. And one of the things that came out, and I think some people in the ministry were very surprised to see this. I certainly wasn't surprised to see it, but people overwhelmingly gave very positive responses when it comes to when it came to their personal experiences with the police. But when you ask them about how they think, the police engage with the public, what's the level of courtesy, what's the level of fairness, what's the level of competence, and all of that, very often they give you very, very negative responses. And the thing is, when they talk about themselves, they have the first-hand personal experience. But when it comes to the public, where does that information comes from? It derives from the media. And quite often what we see is that the media will highlight all of the negative things. There's so much that is so good that happens, yet somehow that doesn't seem to be newsworthy, and it doesn't make it to the front page or even the second or third page. So really, the media, in essence, perhaps not even intentionally, paints the police service in a very negative way. And this is what pervades the public's consciousness. And unfortunately, what it leads to is a lack of confidence, low reporting rates. People are afraid to come and report to the police because they feel the police may go back to the criminal elements, etc. So it really creates a very negative cycle and a negative impact on crime. So the media really has a lot of responsibility when it comes to how they write, because indeed the media has the power to shape reality. Now, coming back to your other question, you asked about the costs of crime and the people who benefit. Indeed, people do benefit, whether it's those in the legal profession and other services. There is a lot of money to be made. And you could almost say crime is very, very big business. Even if you look at the national security budget, you'd realize that it's a budget in the billions and billions of dollars. But there are a lot of other cost implications for crime. In fact, the Inter-American Development Bank did a regional study very, very recently where they looked at the cost of various crimes, and you'd be really surprised at the cost to the national purse and the cost to taxpayers, especially, of crimes being committed. For instance, one of the figures that they calculated was that the cost to the state of each murder that happens in Trinidad and Tobago actually exceeds 300,000 US dollars. Now, the average member of the public might wonder that kind of figure, how is it so high? But when you talk about the costs associated with legal fees, the costs associated with investigations, with forensic analysis, which some of which may even have to go abroad, and all of the other associated costs, you find that the cost of crime is something that mushrooms and explodes. So really the cost of it goes far beyond the money that is allocated to national security, but it's a cost, not just in terms of dollars and cents, but it's a cost in terms also of life, a cost in terms of the curtailment of freedom, a cost in terms of a health cost, a cost when it comes to psychological well-being of persons, especially those who are affected by high levels of fear of crime and so forth. So really crime is something that cuts at the root of so many fundamental issues in the society, and it really hurts the society in a very, very fundamental way. And I think far beyond that which the average citizen recognizes.
Mr. Ali, just before we close, that perception of crime, the perception of the police service, we always hear about that confidence in the police service. We just have about a minute. Just quickly tell us about, has that confidence been increasing in the police service?
Well, I think that the public at large will be best positioned, to measure that. But, I think that the police service is really making a conscious effort. And I'll give this an example, that the police is represented in a session like this, to have the opportunity to be able to, to engage members of the public through, the use of the media. And I think that should continue, so that we have the opportunity to be able to tell the good work that is being done by the police, and to encourage, most importantly, the community to partner with the TTPS to be able to, to do justice to the situation. But, I think that, we are making strides. There are other programs, that I'm aware of, that, the police take the opportunity to engage members of the community. And, we hope that that continues to be able to build public trust and confidence in the police service.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. This has been Nation in Focus, our first program discussing crime with Dr. Keron King, a criminologist and senior lecturer at COSTAATT, legal officer in the police service, Corporal Zaheer Ali, and joining us via Zoom is Dr. Randy Seepersad, a criminologist and the coordinator of the criminology unit at the University of the West Indies. I am Sunil Lalla. On behalf of us all at TDT Limited, thank you for joining us.